So for the last panel discussion for the day, the crucial role of CFOs in managing business crisis and turnarounds, navigating uncertainty with agility and strategic leadership. For this, I would like to introduce our moderator for the session, Mr. Sanjay Patni, Associate Director and National Head Institutional Sales, Mirae Asset Investment Managers, India Private Limited. Mr. Sanjay Patni manages institutional business vertical for India at Mirae Asset Management Limited. In the capacity, he is entrusted upon to handle and enhance institutional business in India. Along with his team, he advises corporate clients, family offices, bank treasuries, retirement funds, and UHNIs promoter channels partner to take prudent steps to consider asset management product basket opportunities to invest in India and overseas market. Along with this, I would also introduce our panelist, Mr. Sumendra Jain, CFO Region India and Asia Pacific, SMS Group India, Ms. Suparna Bhattacharya, CFO Schneider Electric Infrastructure Limited, Mr. Aditya Chamaria, CFO Grupo Bimbo, and Mr. Anil Suneja, CFO India Medtronic. Can we have a huge round of applause for all the panel members?
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I think interesting topic prior to this panel discussion for sure by Mr. Madan. It's interesting to hear this topic as well, because when you talk about fostering and looking at the issues which Mr. Madan talked about, I think that leads to uncertainty for sure. Let me introduce myself. My name is Sanjay Patni. I take care of institutional business for Mirae Asset. I'm based in Mumbai, and I've been there out of 25 years plus experience. 20 and a half years I've been into financial markets and being part of investment management business for a long period of time now, and worked in various geographies. Of course, for me, I worked in Delhi for 6.5 years as well. So for me, it's always good to come back to Delhi, and I keep traveling that way. Now, let me put some perspective to this topic. And of course, what's the better way to use maybe a cricket as the analogy to sort of touch upon it. Let me give you some perspective around it. Think about it. I'm sure most of us, I'm sure, including panelists, we must have seen Sunil Gavaskar playing long back. Okay, we must have seen that. You must have seen him retiring as well. But when you look back, do you remember in 60 overs in what point in time, he made just 36 runs. You know that? Anybody remembers that? Okay, I'm sure if you watched that match, you'll remember that. I'm an investment management person. I can tell you, at times all your investments don't perform. Okay, but it doesn't mean that your investment was a bad decision. Okay, that maybe the timing was bad. Maybe the pitch was tough for Sunil Gavaskar to make those runs. At times, you also find that Yuvraj Singh made same 36 runs in just 1 hour. Okay? You also find that maybe on a roulette table, wherever you put the chip, maybe during COVID time, that money has just doubled, tripled, 4 times, 7 times, 20 times maybe, I do not know. Which also means at times your investments can multiply depending on the market conditions, external environment, etc. But third thing, you also find in 2020, just before COVID, in India-Australia match, India made just 36 runs. India made just 36 runs in the first innings of a test match. Imagine same 36 runs in 3 different scenarios, but maybe at this point in time, the situation was the worst. I'm only trying to bring upon the topic or the panel here that times can come around uncertain. There can be situations where you are actually trying to find out a way, but that can still put pressure on you, and you can't find out. But sometimes are genuine that these times are really tough. So on that note, let me welcome all the panelists to this topic. I thought let me just put the perspective right to the topic, because I'm sure we are going through, in my view, next 12 months are going to be uncertain. At least from an investment management point, if I were to say, I see that maybe valuations, maybe the new president assuming the charge in US, or maybe many more things which are coming, and I'm sure you heard the ceasefire today morning announcement happen. That's an interesting perspective which you're coming. So on that note, let me move maybe Anil to you first question maybe on that topic. I remember talking to you offline, okay, and a very interesting thing you said, embracing and accepting the change. So I think I'll go back not into financial side, but look at how do you expect that embracing the change itself is a challenge. How do you accept it, first of all?
Thanks for that question, and good afternoon, everyone. Pleased to be part of this panel and in this August gathering. So yeah, I think the fact of the matter is, and as Sanjay, you mentioned, that change is something which has been there in the past, and you see change is going to happen in future as well. That's an evolving thing, for sure. The way we respond to change is what we control. We don't control the change. And change can be a challenge for a person or an organization, and change can be a chance for another individual or an organization as well. So a lot depends on the mindset. How do we deal with change? And that's where one of the things which I learned through my experience as well as from other leaders is there are 3 enablers for change. And how do you deal with change? And these are 3 E's. Starts with, the first E is embrace, second is evolve, and third is elevate. Now, talking about the embrace first, right? So, very well-established phenomena. Across the years, change has been there. The degree of change has been varying. We saw change during COVID as well. We saw change pre-COVID as well. And we are seeing change after COVID as well. So change is inevitable. The only way to deal with that is how do you modulate your response to that particular change? And those who embrace the change are far more successful in terms with being relevant for today. I think the classical example for that would be Nokia or Netflix. Nokia took the change in a very different way, while Netflix took the change in a very positive direction, wherein they embraced the change and went into a different direction altogether. So the way to respond to change is embrace the change first. If you can't change the change, if you can't change the direction of the change, embrace it. Second comes, which is more evolving. It's not just about saying that, okay, change is here and we have to embrace it, but evolving through it as well. The fact of the matter is, what brought organization or people to where they are today will not take them to the next level. What has worked for organizations or people in the past, in their personal or professional space, is not going to take them to the next level as well. So it's evolving through that as well. While you embrace the change, but it's evolution which determines how you are going to deal with that. And last but not the least, I would say, is more about elevating through it. It's more about the skill set which the change requires, you as an individual or your team as a team of professionals. The same side of skill set which was relevant 10 years back is not relevant today, and the skill set which we have today is not going to be relevant 10 years later. So to put the perspective to your question, Sanjay, I think it's more about, understanding that change is a constant thing, embracing through it, evolving through it, and thereby elevating yourself to be future ready to deal with such changes.
No, I completely agree with you. Can't think more. But Suparna, extending that question maybe slightly differently, should the change be responded quickly, or we should hold on, hold your nerves, and then try and mull over it, and come back, and then try to get into those times again and take an action?
All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and pleased to be a part of this panel of my esteemed co-panelists, and probably, of course, I come to speak, but I definitely take away much more than I can, share. So, having said that, talking about change and our response, there are different ways to handle a change. How we handle and what is the ask at the moment, that is sometimes very, very, relevant. That's very important for you to understand and do that balancing act and see what is required. So I'll just tell you out of my own experience in my earlier organization, where I was a CFO. It's a Japanese organization called Horiba, and they are into multiple businesses with automotive testing, medical diagnostics, semiconductors, etc. With the onset of the lockdown, which was the first lockdown in 2020 March, first thing, we were not aware of anything, what to do and how to handle that change. The most important thing and how we could address what is the immediate requirement and what is a later requirement. The example was that since we were into the medical diagnostics business, and that's also something which was, at that point of time, medical diagnostics was very, important in terms of the supply chain, etc. So and we also had the automotive and the semiconductor business, but our response was the quickest to, enable the supply chain of the medical diagnostics business. So automotive, more of a B2B into the testing and R&D, that could take a back seat, but out of experience and out of what the market wants, what the customer wants, and at the same time, what we can offer. The first thing was to take care of what was the ask at the moment.
Correct.
At that moment, the ask was medical diagnostics, so we had to keep that supply chain up and running. Maybe the other engineering businesses were a little bit on hold at that point of time. So it is the situation which, gives the signal as to what is required. Having said that, it has to be basically a right balance of how you want to face the changes of what is the ask and what is happening in the industry. While we all talk a lot about agility amongst ourselves, challenging the status quo, being ready for change, at the same time, there are a lot of resources in terms of money, investments, our own bandwidth, our own man-hours, which are required to bring about the change. So facing that change with the right approach of, and prioritizing is how we need to handle any change which, comes knocking our door.
No, absolutely agree with you. I'll tell you something interesting. I was in Delhi in October 8 when the global financial crisis happened. I still remember 9th October till 29th October, some 20 days, we saw a flurry of redemptions and people redeeming monies. And one of the CMD of a large company, I cannot name the company here, they had all the plethora of information available, they had everything available, and they have access to anyone in the world they could speak to, but the CMD just said, redeem, okay. And in a month's time, I'm sure you'll remember, market just bounced back because it was more of a liquidity crisis, just a matter of time. On that note, Aditya, let me ask you, because as a CFO and in the organization, the CFO partnering with CEO, in this case maybe CMD, providing information and inputs, etc., and also you may be a conduit between the business partnering in finance and the CEO also. So you may be playing a very different role than what you were playing 15 years back now. Has that changed in uncertain times now?
Thanks, Sanjay, for that, and good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I would like to, thanks Gain Skill as well to provide this wonderful platform to interact with all of you guys. Now, allow me to start my discussion with perhaps throwing back a questions to the public to say there are many CFOs and there are many esteemed, senior professionals here. What is the role of a CFO? Any 2-3 answers quickly which comes in the mind? What is the role of a CFO? Yes, please. Great.
Sure.
Financial strategy, great. Protect value and create value, right. So, everything is the right answer. Perhaps when somebody asked me that, okay, what is the role of a CFO? And I head finance, legal, IT, and revenue growth maximizations in the organizations. So when they ask me, okay, why do you have, let's say, IT or a legal reporting to you? Why do you have a revenue growth maximization, which is a sales reporting to you? How does it gel around? For me, what is the role of a CFO? Anything which impact business and anything which has a financial decision involved, which impacts shareholders, a CFO has a role to play into it. For me, what we believe now, gone are the days, in fact, perhaps it never was, but more to do now, is that CFO is not about accounting. CFO is not about just establishing a process or the foundations. It has a much more implication. In fact, what I always proudly say is that a CFO is a co-pilot for the business. Any function which cut throughout all across the other functions, apart from being the CEO, is perhaps a CFO, right? And I hope everybody would agree on that front. So I have been always working on 5 principles or the 5 P's for the CFOs. The first one is all about, the first P is about people. The second P is about establishing a process and the policy around it. The third P is how you work on the productivity across the organization. The 4th P is about planning across the across your actions, because for every action has an equal and opposite reactions, right? So how you plan your actions are also very important. And when you do all these 4 Ps, what you basically need is a partnering. So what I mean to say here is that perhaps, a finance is a function which works like a catalyst. Do we remember what was a scientific definition of catalyst? A substance which alters a rate of chemical reaction without itself undergoing any chemical changes.
Sure. Yeah.
Which means that sometimes you have to accelerate the speed, which means sometimes you have to slow down the speed. So a function which perhaps can only do this is a CFO. And when it comes to a CFO, there are 2 ways of operating it. And sometimes we proudly say we are about like a like-minded people, right? But there's a difference between like-minded people and like-the-minded people. So you will have, lots of people coming in and saying that, okay, that is what CEO is saying, let's follow it. I strongly urge everyone, never take anything on the face value. You would be a like-minded people only when you stop liking the minded people. What I mean to say, don't be a person which becomes a yes to your superior or a yes to your boss or yes to other functions. Evaluate the thing, understand the thing, observe the thing, and then perhaps take a right call. And when it comes to CEO, I told him one thing very clearly. Don't expect me to be here and then say, okay, yes, you are right, or since you have a superior authority, we just go by your decision. It's either I will learn, or will convince exactly what is the right thing. So the last statement which I want to just say exactly that, for me, the definition after being in a leadership, the word P&L has changed from profit and loss account to people and leadership. And the word BS, which is balance sheets, has changed from balance sheet to balancing the sides. So, just to get back to you, Sanjay, I think it's very, very critical that how do we ensure that we are seeing everything as, if it's your own business, what is the call you take? Not just as a finance hat. Perhaps for me, that makes a difference.
A lot of people say when you start doing like that, the growth stalls. So I agree with you on that note. So there is no doubt about it in the corporate world. So that's fine with me. But similarly, on that same thing which I talked about, give me an example if you've taken a decision, your take in this uncertain period of maybe geopolitical environment, you have global economic scenario changing, etc. Any example which you feel in the last 3-4 years you have taken, maybe last 1 year you have taken, which is interesting for audience to know.
Yeah, see, we all live in a VUCA environment, right? Vulnerable, uncertain, conductive atmosphere. So there would never be a plain ground which helps you to evolve and just move across. So, recent example, perhaps in last 1 month or something like that, after Donald Trump coming in, and even, we are Mexico-based company, by the way. So we are world largest bakery with head office being at Mexico, and it's like a $25 billion turnover. Obviously in the company, we also have a debt to fund the exponential growth what we are having. Sure. Now what has happened, interestingly, in last 3 to 4 months, peso versus USD has depreciated by around 20%. And can you beat it? It's like 18 to 20% is basically what the currency has depreciated, which means just not the interest coverage ratio, but it's also about the debt in absolute term in terms of pesos has actually increased by 18%. So India being a growth story, we have acquired 3 companies in last 3 years, and we have a huge exponential, the growth plans what we are building up. Now, when the conducive environment have changed, you cannot keep operating of the same leverage what you were playing across. So we have to change the role play. Being an FMCG company, you have to then strike that if the capital has become a dearth for you, which brings a lots of pressures on the balance sheets, on your interest coverage ratio, on your funding, you have to sometimes play a balance of what are you better off? Manufacturing on your own, which means buying land, buying building, setting up all the plant and machinery, or you go to a 2P or a 3P model, which is a 2-party or a 3-party models, where probably you rent a shed for a land and a building, and perhaps put your capex, which is plant and machinery, or you completely outsource. So the point is, the situation will change. At that time, you need to see what is the best in that part. Maybe circle it back to a catalyst to understand exactly what needs to be done at a particular situation. The other example what comes in my mind was when I joined Raymond Consumer Care, the company which just got sold to Godrej, maybe 6-7 months before. So I stepped in on 1st April 2020, which was the peak of the COVID. And I just moved from a lovely cocoon or a shelter of the company in which I was operating to a company which was completely shut down in terms of the operations. So at that time, imagine my first day was how do we pay salaries and how do we pay vendors, and it was a complete gridlock. And we were not allowed to enter because the products what we were selling was basically, the deodorant and the perfumes in the Park Avenue. And it took quite a time for us to convince the government that even contraceptives are necessity product while the lockdown is going on. So by the time it took that time, we have to come out to say that, okay, we comes with the instant, sanitizer, which most of the company was coming in through. But that was just to get a foot into the door. So when it comes to crisis management, you have to just see that exactly how you are stopping the derailment.
Correct.
And that stopping the derailment is nothing else but working like a catalyst.
No, absolutely agree with you. Anil, at Mirae Asset, I can tell you we are extremely bullish on healthcare. You represent that sector, and your experience says that. And it's been a spotlight. There is no doubt that's been a sunrise industry. Not only pharma, but I'll say healthcare in a focused manner. In these times, and pharma was coming, or healthcare was coming from a bad phase, pre-COVID, right? It was a bad, typical time, and now it has become like the go-to industry. How has been your journey in that period, in last 3-4 years? Interesting for us to know, and especially in an uncertain period, coming back to certainty, and now growing as well.
No, I think that's an interesting journey, which healthcare as a sector has seen over the last, I would say, 5 to 10 years. And healthcare has been a focus or a limelight sector very recently, the last 5-7 years, predominantly because of, obviously one because of the COVID, but also with the fact that government is putting a lot of investment, a lot of money behind healthcare in different shape and form. And not only that, but also the technology advancement which is coming across in healthcare sector is also kind of like a big motivator to be in that sector and observe how sector is going up. But all these reasons why healthcare become in limelight definitely brings challenges. And if I talk about the challenges which the sector has seen in the last 5-7 years, clearly I think COVID was one of the period which clearly indicated that how fragile supply chain operations can be, and how our financial modeling when it comes to demand planning can be jeopardized. That was one big change which healthcare as a sector has to see as well. The other aspect to which relates to this from a demand and supply disruption perspective is the economic pressure. I think healthcare was a sector which was perceived that it's making significant amount of money because of all the investments as well as all the ask externally, but as a sector, because of the raw material, labor, and multiple other reasons for the cost increase, it has seen its own share of challenges when it comes to the economic pressure. Now, the technology is another aspect which has been a headwind, or a tailwind as a headwind as well. Now, when I say tailwind, because of the fact of the AI coming into healthcare, because of the fact that robotics is the future of the healthcare when it comes to surgery, the fact that the telemedicine, telecounseling, those elements came into the healthcare space, it definitely provided a lot of excitement, but that's another change management which needs to be driven. An organization has to really look into the way they are operating. Is that making sense to operate from a future perspective? Another change which was witnessed very clearly was the fact that the value-based care was a concept being introduced in the overall healthcare segment. Now, that is much beyond just buying a product or a services. So all these changes have been very predominantly driven, revolving around the healthcare space. But how do we respond to that particular change? I think that's something as a finance leader, as CFOs, the industry CFOs has to think about. And when I speak to my peer CFOs in the healthcare space, everyone has done similar things, but slightly different way. I think the first thing which was there, because of the uncertainty which COVID brought in, or any other uncertainty, even technology or those elements as well which you can't predict, how do you bring it that scenario-based analysis, worst case, best case scenarios? In the period of crisis, as a CFO, given the fact we know what's happening in the organization, we are in a unique ability to predict or to at least create that predictive modeling that what the best case scenario looks and what's the worst case scenario look. And the role of finance leader becomes in this situation is to see that how can you maximize the opportunity which is coming your way or minimize the risk which is coming your way. So you were talking to Aditya about the role of CFOs. I think this is clearly an example wherein the role of finance or CFO has moved from hindsight to insight to foresight.
That's true.
It's not just about creating those insight that look, situation is bad, but also creating a predictive analysis that look, situation is going to be bad or worse or good in future if we do these 5 things.
Yeah.
So that's the first and foremost response to the change when it comes from a healthcare space perspective, because when you are dealing in healthcare, you're dealing with patients, you're dealing with caregivers, and you need to have continuity of your supplies, continuity of your services. So hence, having that modeling always helps. I think the other way to respond to this change is all about resource allocation. With the pressures on the healthcare sector, not just to drive the sales, but also to drive profitable sales, this has been the talk at the board in various organizations that how do you reallocate resources from a low margin, low growth business to a high margin, high growth business. And that's where as CFO, we are in a unique position to see what's working well and what's not working well. And if something is not working well, and we know the future, that this may not work well in the future, better to take those resources out and move to a high growth, high margin business kind of stuff. The third thing which I would say is the fact that the expectation from the customer has moved to value-based care. The fact that technology has been into the core from a healthcare sector perspective, the business modeling, the go-to-market model for many of the healthcare sector, whether you're med devices, pharma, or diagnostic company, has evolved. So the way things were working in the past in terms of the go-to-market model has totally evolved the way it's working today. Today, you don't go to a pharmacist to buy or medicines, you get it online. Today, I mean, you can wear a ring just like me. I'm not promoting that ring, but that can give you an indicator of of your health parameters. So technology has evolved, and the expectations has evolved as well, and that's require organization to adapt to the new way of working from a go-to-market model perspective. So to sum it up, I think healthcare sector has seen bad times pre-COVID, but COVID has actually, or post-COVID, the healthcare sector has really been a use case for transformation. A lot of things have been transformed in the way things are being done, whether it is from a market model perspective, whether it is from a product perspective, because the innovation product is real. And that's where the future lies from a healthcare perspective.
Sure. Suparna, I know they're thinking, but still I want to ask this question because it's connecting with what Aditya is saying and what it's easy to say that growth can happen in uncertain time. It's easy to hear that. But when technology is evolving, merger and acquisition becomes even more important in that environment. In that environment, you want to have growth and M&A activity. What's your take on that? That's most important from the next leg of growth.
All right. So I'll first, like you said, people and leadership. The PNL is now, taken a new form in the talking of people and leadership. I'll come from, what is the tone at the top of any organization, what the leadership thinks. So the philosophy of the leadership to embrace change is extremely important. And apart from that, what the leadership would think in terms of their affordability, their market insight, their short-term and long-term goals. So all that really are important factors in, thinking of M&A and such strategies of, inorganic growth in an organization. Having said that, it's again, I will say, it's not only, the top line or, the additions into your revenue. It is how you can embrace that change, and most importantly in an M&A, more than the ROIs and the funding and etc. that we work out, it's the amalgamation of the culture of two different organizations, which actually determines whether that an M&A or a strategic alliance fails or is successful. So for me, despite being a CFO, my first my first thought in terms of any M&A would be the culture integration to be seen first amidst the changing times, the uncertainties of the future. And while we think of the uncertainties, if there is a target to acquire, the target company would also think much more on their securities and their future, etc. So for me, it's more of a culture, value, integration amidst the changing times, and then of course all our numbers come into play, and ultimately I'll again take from Aditya, it evolves into a P&L. That's how it happens.
That's a good abbreviation I learned today.
Yeah.
On that note, let me ask you before I hand over back to them the mic, but I have a quick question for all of you, okay? But only one word answer, okay? Nothing else. Maybe I'll start with Suparna from you. RBI governor says inflation management first and a growth later. What's your take? One word answer.
Can you repeat your question?
RBI governor says, I want to manage inflation first, then I'll look at growth again.
So again, it has to be a balance.
Balance. Yeah, I think. One word answer.
Growth.
Growth, okay. Aditya. Catalyst, okay, interesting. Anil, one sector other than healthcare which you feel is like 500% confident it's going to fire. One sector. Too long a time. Aditya, which sector?
I think infra.
Infra. Suparna?
Data centers.
Data centers.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still thinking about healthcare has been on top of my mind, so still healthcare.
Biased answer, no doubt. And one sector you should not get into right now, ever. Suparna, one sector should not get into right now.
There's nothing like that. Everything has a taker.
Everything has
a taker.
You're an angel investor. You can't be like that.
So I invest in everything.
In everything. I have three people here, On my left, I have Saurav Ganguly. I have Smriti Mandhana. And I have a Shubman Gill there. I can see that for sure. Okay. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for good answers and candid opinions. Thank you so much. I hope all of you like the panel discussion. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sanjay. And I would like to do the honors by you only to Ms. Suparna Bhattacharya, CFO Schneider Electric Infrastructure.